Okay, so welcome back to the next part of the rating system tutorial. In this part of the tutorial, as explained in the last, we're going to be creating this item exists function, which is essentially just a little nibbly bit in here that's going to check if the item exists, because obviously the user can go ahead and pass any value through this URL using get, the get parameter. And we're also going to be creating the all-important rate function. And by the end of this part, we have tied everything together, because essentially what we're going to do is we're going to allow these values to be updated, and then that will reflect on our results that we get back here. Okay, so everything's going to look right. Now I've just refreshed. That's an error there. Item exists is an undefined function because we haven't created it. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so this is going to be a relatively straightforward function, but it might take some time getting used to the way I'm going to do this. I'm going to use the ternary operator again, so I'm going to use an inline if statement if you like. So let's define the function. I'm going to say PHP function item exists. Now, if you have remembered correctly, you will know that we are passing in the table name, we're passing in the item. So, table, comma, item. So let's go ahead and just sanitize this data. So, table equals MySQL real escape string. Now, this isn't entirely necessary because we're defining the values within our code, so no one has the ability to change this yet. You may find yourself at the point where you're not, where you're going to need to sanitize data, but for now I'm just going to do this. It's good practice, I guess. And I'm also going to sanitize item by casting that to an integer, because it's always going to be an integer. It's the ID within our database table here, so we don't need that ever to be a string or anything like that. So that will automatically remove any data that could cause an SQL injection. And remember, item is the important one because this is defined by the user in the get URL. Okay, so what we're going to do is now we're going to return either true or false, and I'm going to do this all in one line. So this will either confuse you completely or it will help you understand. So return. If this condition is true, we want to return true. Otherwise, we want to return false. Okay, that's the easy part. So as long as this is true, we're returning true. Otherwise, we're returning false. Essentially, what we're going to be doing inside of this is we're going to be saying if the count of the results we're returning by the ID that we're specifying is equal to 1, it's true. Okay, so follow along and we'll go ahead and do this. So I'm going to say MySQL query select count. We're going to use the count function, and we're going to use the ID as the field to count, and I'm going to say from. Now here's where we need to define table, okay, because we're specifying the table that we want to return the count from, where ID is equal to item. Okay. And now, well, essentially this will return 1. If we provide an item ID of say 1, we know that we have 1 here, so this will return 1 because it will count 1 row. Okay, that's probably as far as I can explain that. But we need to return the result. There's no good just shoving a query in here. So I'm going to wrap this entire thing in the MySQL result function. And I pass an option, pass a parameter here which is 0. Okay, this just returns the count. So this now, this whole thing here has either returned 0 or 1. Okay, or more than 1, but we know that our ID field is unique. So I'm going to say if this equals 1, then return true. Okay, so item exists now exists. I go ahead and refresh, and it says call to undefined function rate. Now this is a bad thing because we haven't created the rate function, but it's also a good thing because we know that everything in here works. We also know that we're now here, which means this entire thing here will have validated true. Okay, so we can go ahead and we can actually play around with this to see if it works. So item equals 1. Let's pick an ID that we don't have. We end here at 20. So let's go ahead and define, I don't know, say 51 in here. Oops. Yeah, that's fine. That has actually worked. But what's happened is that the way this has worked and the way that I originally wrote it means that if this here evaluates to false, we don't do this in here, but then we go ahead and redirect. So I'm just going to go die like that, and you'll notice that if I change this now to, oops, okay, so back here, if I change this now to 51, you'll see that we die and nothing happens. That's because this hasn't been, or this hasn't evaluated to true, therefore this hasn't run. Okay, relatively simple if you just know, the basic logic of the way this works. So when we go ahead and try and rate this, everything works, but we obviously don't have the rate function. Let's go ahead and build the rate function. So this is relatively straightforward. So function rate. Now remember, what do we need to pass through here? Well, we need to pass the table, the item, and the rating. So table, item, rating. I don't need to explain again why we are passing the table in. That's just for flexibility when we come to rate other things. Let's go ahead and sanitize some of the data as we did before. I'm going to say table equals MySQL real escape string, and I'm going to sanitize that table variable that's been passed in. Not that we need to, but we'll do the same for item, which is again very important because this is user defined value, and also the rating, which again is a user defined value, so we want to go ahead and sanitize this as well. So we've cast both them to an integer. Now we need to go ahead and perform our query. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to go ahead and update our table. So MySQL query, and this is all that's needed now. We need to update, we need to pick a table. Well, that's defined by our function to allow flexibility. So update table, set, rating total. Now remember, let's go ahead and explain these a bit further. Rating total is, if I click 5, it adds 5 onto this value. If I then click 2, it adds another 2, so that'll be 7. So it basically builds up the amount of ratings. So you're going to have a rather large number in here if you have a lot of ratings on a particular item. That's because we then increment this rating count, which we can then do our sum, which we did a couple of parts back. So set rating total equal to rating total, so the current value of rating total, plus the rating, so plus rating. Okay, and then comma, we want to also update rating count equals rating count, we've come over a bit here, plus 1. Okay, now we don't just want to do that because that's going to do all of our fields. We want to say where ID is equal to ID. Okay, so that's it. So what we're doing here is we're setting the rating total, we're incrementing the value that we've just rated that particular item upwards. So 5, we rated it 5, then another user rated it 1, that'd be 6. Then another user rated it 4, that'd be 10, and then 5, that'd be 15. I'm sure you get the point. And then we're just incrementing rating count by 1 every single time. Okay, so what we could actually do is set this as an auto increment, but I like to have the more control within the application itself. It's fine to add an auto increment to a primary key and all of that, but let's just keep it like this for now. So we're incrementing that where the ID equals the ID. No, not at all. This would result in an error. It's item. So well done for those of you that spotted that. Okay, so now that we've done this, this is actually going to update. So let's go ahead and it might look a bit magical, but let's go ahead and click on something and rate this. So I'm going to rate this a 5. Now that's turned to 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and explain this process. If you look at just at the bottom above the element inspector, you can see that we've got item equals 1 and rating equals 5. So what's happened is we've clicked on this, we have run through this here, we've rated something which we've already just gone over, so I won't go over that again. Now let's take a look at our database. So rating total 5, rating count 1. That means that we've got that means that we've got 5 divided by 1. that's 5. So we've rated it at 5. Let's go ahead and rate it at 1. It's now at 3, so it's in the middle. So when we refresh, we've got 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, so this is how we work out our average rating, which is the correct way to work out an average rating. And because we've added the flexibility of item equals 2, you can see the URL just at the bottom of Chrome there. We can rate any of our articles as many times as we like. Okay, so we can keep adding ratings in here where our users can. Now, I did mention earlier on that we would have a problem here, and we do have a problem that we obviously aren't going to get the nicest values at all times. So we need to go ahead and use the number number format option function. Number format function to actually specify how many decimal places we want to show. So number format, and this is around the rating, remember, within the brackets. So we're essentially putting this value, this rating value, within number format. So we're passing this to the number format function, and we're defining how many places we want afterwards. And I'm just going to say 1. So essentially now this will become 2.1 or 2.2, sorry, because it also rounds upwards. So we can floor this as well. So we could say, for example, actually let's ignore that. We can use floor and seal to do whatever and round up and down, but let's just leave it like this and round the values. It works quite nicely. Okay, so yeah, this is essentially now working. We've got a working rating script, and you can, again, using passing different things in, like articles here, we could pass in a blog table, for example, blah blah blah. We've gone over that a million times. Okay, so there's one thing to bear in mind, which I'm not going to include in this tutorial, and that is allowing users to rate something more than once. Obviously, you can see that I'm just clicking at random and just rating different things at different ratings. You obviously don't want your users to have this kind of ability on your website. So you need to determine the best way for you that's going to only allow your users to vote once. Now, the best way to do this would be to integrate it with some kind of system that you have where your users can log in, and this would involve essentially storing when they have rated something. So you could store this in a separate table, and you could say that user ID of 5 has rated article of 1, and then don't let them rate it again, and the check that you would include would be in here somewhere. It's all very sort of linear straight the way through and everything, but it's just for learning. So that's one way you do it. Another way you could do it is with cookies or sessions, but obviously that's very breakable. A user can clear their cookies, and a user can close a browser and start a new session. So the best way to do this would be to somehow integrate it with your login system. But for now, that's how you create a rating system in PHP. Relatively straightforward, probably not the best implemented example, but again, you can expand on this, make it a lot better, include it within your within your site, and we've got the flexibility there to allow this to be a lot more portable than most other rating systems. So that's how to create a rating system in PHP.